Hey everybody, here we go. Thanks so much for joining us. So today we're going to be talking about whether or not ongoing criticism of Hillary Clinton is unnecessary. We're going to define this by saying that ongoing criticism of Hillary Clinton causes more harm than good. And my opponent, if he agrees to all that, is going to be saying that criticizing Hillary Clinton causes more good than harm. The word great doesn't really attach itself easily to Hillary Clinton. After all, this is somebody who was one of the worst presidential candidates in American history. But in defeat, she's been turned into something else by conservatives and by the Donald Trump coalition. She has become one of the greatest strawman candidates ever seen in American politics. Today, we're going to establish three main reasons why continuing to criticize Hillary Clinton is extremely unhelpful and unnecessary. One, Hillary Clinton is being used as a distraction and a strawman opponent by Donald Trump and his coalition. Two, persecuting a defeated political opponent sets a terrible example in American politics. And three, all of this reduces and prejudices the credibility of any legitimate investigation into Hillary Clinton and those around her. So let me kick off this by saying, first of all, perhaps the most obvious point that Hillary Clinton was not a strong presidential candidate, but in defeat, she is being used as a strawman candidate by Donald Trump and his coalition. At the present time, Hillary Clinton holds no public office. She holds no position in the Democratic Party. She is not a figure you'll see on the day-to-day news in America. Quite simply, she is no more a player in American politics than many private citizens. And yet, she is subjected to a constant stream of public criticism and attacks by Donald Trump and his political allies. What then is the purpose of all of this? What is the purpose of building her into a straw man opponent? It's nothing less than an effort to distract the public and everyone from the very real issues facing President Trump and those around him. President Trump fears investigations by Congress. So what do we see? We see the rise of the Uranium One issue, a 5-year-old deal between Russians and a Canadian uranium company. To say the least, Hillary Clinton has a very small, if any, significant role in this. So that is not a strong criticism and not a strong thing to be talking about for Donald Trump. President Trump also fears investigations by the FBI. So what do we see? We see political efforts to get the FBI to dive back into Clinton-connected issues like Uranium One, like Clinton's emails, and other things. So all of these things we can see serve as a distraction and to use Hillary Clinton as nothing more than a straw man opponent, which is broadly harmful to the country and certainly not helpful to any public debate in America. Passing the mic over.
All right, so I think that the crux of this issue, of this point in time, the ongoing criticism of Hillary Clinton is unnecessary. The key component of this is justice, right? So we need to set this between two parameters. Has Hillary Clinton done things that deserve receiving justice or repercussion? And then two, has she received that justice or repercussion? If she has done example one, but has not received the repercussion, then we have to criticize. I think that's a fair component. So we need to look at the fact of, has Hillary Clinton committed injustices or wrongs, done things that are corrupt, things like deleting of emails or things like that, Benghazi and lying to the American people about Benghazi. The list goes on and on. There are currently 4 active investigations on Hillary Clinton, and there are other investigations on the Clinton Foundation for money for favors. So clearly we're seeing corruption and we've seen wrongs done. Meaning there is injustice or there is wrong done. Now, has she received the justice due yet? I would argue no, because these investigations have not concluded. This criticism could shed light onto other things. We could see more growth in new information if that criticism is ongoing. So I would argue that it is necessary and it is important. Now, to address that Hillary Clinton is being used as a straw man. Well, a straw man is used as a false someone who has built up a false set of views for a person. So to say that Hillary Clinton is a straw man for the Democratic Party would require the Democratic Party to disagree with her views or it not be a fair representation. They would have to be rebuking her views at some point. We don't see that because she was the most recent Democratic candidate that was promoted, and then we've seen leadership still still continuing to promote her. To your other point, to address that she's not involved anymore. She's still writing books. She's still being invited to speak. The Clinton Foundation is still incredibly powerful. To say that just because she isn't in political office right now doesn't mean anything, because she's also talked about the possibility of running again. She hasn't said that she won't. She hasn't said she will. So given that we have active investigations, we have wrongs that she's done, we have not seen justice of the wrongs that she has done that has been given, and to also say that she is still a powerful presence in the Democratic Party, even though she doesn't have current power, I think the criticism is entirely fair, and I'll pass it over to you.
Awesome. So we'll deal with the idea of justice. I think my third point clashes with this pretty well, so I'm going to leave that for the time being. I'm just going to kind of move on with my constructive material for a minute. So what we have is the last thing that Donald Trump fears is that he fears the dissatisfied voters, and this is a president right now who entered office with a 46% approval rating and now has a 36% approval rating. So even if we thought that it was a good idea, even from a nakedly political idea, for him to be criticizing Hillary Clinton, it doesn't seem to be working for him in the polls. But he does continue to attack her because it energizes his base. What have we seen? We've seen rumor mongering about a possible Clinton shadow cabinet. We've seen fear mongering about the deep state. All of this is designed to discredit institutions that would and could one day shine a light on President Trump's own misdeeds. So in truth, we all know what Hillary Clinton is. She is one of the weakest political candidates ever to run for public office on the Democratic side. She lost to Donald Trump, and instead of allowing his opponent to fade into obscurity, as has been done so often on the case in American politics, we see these political attacks. So the only reason that she remains a figure in the news is because the Donald Trump coalition continues to put her there. So what we need is to think about what is this precedent we are setting by introducing attacks on a defeated political opponent. This is something that has been very, very rare and has happened almost never in American politics. We have seen presidents who have acted badly have been pardoned. During the Iraq War, what we actually saw were calls from the American left for people like Dick Cheney and Paul Wolfowitz to be dragged to The Hague, to be charged with war crimes for their activities during the Iraq War. And President Obama met these kind of attacks and pressures the way they should be met. What he did was he smiled. He had his Justice Department quietly look at whether a case was there, and there was none, and it was dropped. He said broadly, presidents should be looking forward. This is President Obama speaking, rather than backward. And that was the precedent until Donald Trump got involved. So what we see is that a dangerous precedent is starting to be emerging, that if Hillary Clinton is subjected to these attacks on a continual basis, attorneys general, governors, and presidents could take the Donald Trump route and continue to persecute their political opponents and really drive American politics to a new and dangerous place.
So I think we need to talk about the fact that this resolution does not say that at this point in time the ongoing criticism of Hillary Clinton by Donald Trump is unnecessary. It's simply saying the ongoing criticism. So we're talking about one facet of Donald Trump criticizing Hillary Clinton. So we need to talk about that's an issue, and we can talk about that, but that is not the only aspect of this issue, right? Like, Donald Trump is clearly not the only one that is criticizing Hillary Clinton. So to not refute any of my claims and then to continue on the one point that my opponent has, which is on Donald Trump, is simply an act that this is kind of the only leg that we have to stand on here. Now, if we're talking about Donald Trump critiquing Hillary Clinton and then comparing to Obama, Obama for many years after was blaming Bush for economic issues and stuff when they had very similar economic policies of stimulus packages and things like that. For several years after Bush, who was out of office, Obama was still blaming Bush for these things. To say that it has not been practiced before is just simply not true. Now, we have to bring this back to Hillary Clinton, and is she deserving of criticism? Not are people benefiting off this criticism, but is she deserving of this criticism? And is it necessary for things like judicial review and the active investigations that are against her? One part that you mentioned of her not being that politically active, she currently has a website which is Onward Together that she uses to promote getting people behind her to push her political agenda. So to say that she is inactive is just simply not true. So she's pushing for these things. She's still an active candidate. And so we have to address that. And then also to say that it is unfair to judge a candidate that lost is not true when the candidate is under criminal investigation. If that person, it doesn't matter whether or not she was a candidate or not, right? Like that doesn't change anything. If she has committed wrongs and is currently under federal investigation, her and her foundation both, then the criticism is warranted and the criticism is necessary because we need to get to the bottom of the issue to find out has she committed these wrongs? And then B, is she deserving of the justice? If we are not addressing these issues, then everything else is just side. And so to say that, well, she's a past candidate, we just need to move on. Well, if there's active investigations, if she's still actively doing things in the sphere, then the criticism is, of course, warranted. So to have the only leg to stand on being Donald Trump and his criticism ignores all of the other criticisms from other outlets and sources and people that are creating solutions to getting these investigations moving forward.
Yeah, quick question for you. Would you happen to agree that Donald Trump has been one of the most successful American presidents in history about driving the conversation in the media, especially on the American right?
I think that's a part of this issue, right? So, yeah, sure. Whether or not he's successful in driving a conversation in media, and that's one facet of criticism, right? So we can talk about that. But this is Hillary Clinton is necessary. So this criticism of Hillary Clinton, we're not talking about Donald Trump. We've seen that Obama had huge pushes in the media as well. So I really think that's an aside on the issue.
Okay, so the reason I asked was you were mentioning that I'm focusing like a laser beam here on Donald Trump, but Donald Trump is responsible for both he and himself and his coalition for driving much of the discussion that occurs in the American right wing media. And we see this through his use of tweets, and we see this through his savvy use of media. So when we see that Donald Trump is applying pressure to institutions like the FBI through his attorney general to go back and investigate Clinton, when we see him driving the conversation, I tend to think of this as the Donald Trump ecosystem and coalition. So, me talking about Donald Trump, and that's where a lot of this stuff against Hillary Clinton is coming from. I think he drives a lot of it. But I also agree with you that it's in his ecosystem that the criticism is coming, but it's unhelpful criticism. And one of the reasons that we need to focus this is on your first point of justice. Okay. So it is not a good thing for the president of the United States and those around him in government to be involving themselves rhetorically and through public statements in investigations by the Justice Department or the FBI. And we've seen this on numerous occasions. All right. Now, in fact, there are federal investigations that are known that are going back into the Clintons, but these investigations have already been slandered and have become biased. How do we know this is something Donald Trump does? Because when he was in 2017, when there was a terror attack in New York City, Donald Trump went on Twitter and publicly said that the alleged perpetrator of those attacks should receive the death penalty. That person's lawyers have immediately begun to use the president's own statements in the investigation by the FBI investigation into him to ensure that that person does not, in fact, receive the death penalty. The president's involvement in that situation actually led to investigations being less credible and less effective. And we see the same thing now with any FBI investigation into Hillary Clinton. The Justice Department and the FBI will be less effective in rooting out any actual wrongdoing by the Clinton Foundation, by Hillary Clinton, or anyone around her because of the president's actions and those around him. So if you want to take it like a laser beam and say that Donald Trump is doing the criticisms or those around him are, or the Donald Trump ecosystem is, the end result is that the president and his allies publicly flogging a defeated political opponent in the media make any investigation into that opponent less credible. It is politically slanted. It is, people know the president's preference before the investigation is ongoing, and it's ultimately very, very unhelpful, which I believe is going to be proven when I get into the last of my constructive material.
Okay, so talking about Trump's issue of dealing with tweeting about things and being used in one investigation doesn't really have evidence that it's being used the same in the Hillary Clinton investigation. For your claim to ring true, you would have to provide that same evidence for it being used in the Hillary Clinton investigation, like statements or things like that. So we really can't move with that evidence saying it's been used, like it happened in this totally separate instance, so it could be happening over here. You have to substantiate it a little more. And I think we need to address a point of you talking about how it's only coming from the right wing. It's a right wing focused thing. Well, the Young Democrats are one of the probably the biggest and loudest critics of Hillary Clinton right now, because she's the old face of the Democratic Party right now. And these younger Democrats are heavily critiquing Hillary Clinton and the things that she represents for the Democratic Party because they want it out. And so to say that the Republicans and the right are the only ones that are being critical of Hillary Clinton, I think is an act, and it's just not true, because with Hillary Clinton's actions towards Bernie Sanders in the election, it really lit a fire in young Democrats to say, this is the old part of the Democratic Party that we do not want anymore. Hillary Clinton is under the investigations. She has committed injustices to their beliefs. We need a new face for the Democratic Party. So we're seeing this from both facets, right? We're seeing this come from all angles of criticism. And I think that from the Young Democrat side, they absolutely see it as necessary because they want to see change in their party. And so it is necessary for them to make that push, because if they're not getting her out of there, then those views that they hold to be wrong are still there. And so for them, it's necessary. And then from a justice standpoint, it is still necessary. If we have criticism, Donald Trump, aside from this issue, I'll speak on it a little later, but this criticism, if when people are criticizing someone under investigation, that means that they could also be hunting for new information, finding different things that she has done wrong. That it requires people to find out this information by being critical of her, to find out, oh, the Clinton Foundation is getting into some really shady stuff with a pay for play scenario, or oh, Hillary Clinton dumped 30,000 emails that was discovered by WikiLeaks, as someone being critical of Hillary Clinton. And so that steady criticism and skepticism towards a person who is under criminal investigation is necessary and beneficial.
So I guess my next question would be, why do you think it is that very seldom in American political politics have we seen presidents not held to account for their alleged wrongdoing? Okay, Richard Nixon never went to prison. Why is it that this precedent of persecuting your defeated political opponent has never been a thing until now?
I absolutely think that Richard Nixon should have been in prison, right? I disagree with that motion. But the thing is, that was during a political time where they were like, we don't need a president in jail, we need healing, right? But Hillary Clinton isn't a president, and the investigations weren't still ongoing. They had been concluded. And so what we're seeing is ongoing investigations require criticism. So that's just the issue, is that the investigation is ongoing.
Investigations weren't ongoing at the time of the after the election, right? It wasn't until Donald Trump became president and appointed as Attorney General and all of this that those investigations were reopened. But moving right along, what we have to focus on right now is that the President of the United States had, in addition to persecuting his political opponent and setting a horrible precedent that way, in addition to using Hillary Clinton as a straw man candidate to discredit public institutions like the FBI and the Justice Department and the congressional investigations, has actually done himself a gigantic disservice by continuing to and having his coalition continue to publicly target Hillary Clinton. Now, as my opponent has mentioned, there are legitimate lines of inquiry into the Clintons and their immediate surroundings. So the Clinton foundations and anything that they may have done in terms of political favors would be a legitimate line of inquiry. The meeting between Bill Clinton and former Attorney General Loretta Lynch on a plane would have been a legitimate line of inquiry for the Justice Department or the FBI to investigate. However, by having the President of the United States, who sits atop the American executive branch, insert himself so nakedly into these investigations to apply pressure, as he has done rhetorically and through his Attorney General, to influence these investigations, they are largely discredited and would never see the inside of an American appeals court. As we saw with my example in the New York terror attacks, lawyers are already lining up to use the president's statements in legal cases because he has already publicly influenced the outcome. This is not a helpful thing for American justice. It's not a helpful thing for American democracy. And it is certainly unnecessary. So, what we have is a situation where the president of the United States has taken America to a new low in terms of justice. And those who are seeking to pursue justice have traditionally been able to do so outside of political influence. And yet we see that time and time again. So I'm just going to clash a little bit with your point about the American Democratic Party youth. So what you're doing there is you're reaching down into the Democratic apparatus to try and find some people who think Hillary Clinton is still relevant at the moment. Okay, deep down inside the Democratic establishment, there may be people seeking to use Hillary Clinton as some type of lessons learned example. All right, but in the day-to-day world of American politics, she no longer plays any role whatsoever. She's not on television. She's not cited publicly. Other people are moving to take her place already, and there are numerous examples between Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders. You've mentioned a few of them yourself. All right. So there really is no reason for Hillary Clinton to remain a figure publicly, except that Donald Trump believes that discussion aids him and his coalition.
I want to ask you a question. You mentioned that there are warranted injustices or things that have been done wrong, right? So you mentioned that you agree that Hillary Clinton has done some wrong. So if this criticism was coming from the mouth of anyone other than Donald Trump, would you agree with it?
So again, we have to differentiate between legitimate lines of investigation and confirmed wrongdoing. All right. The reason Jim Comey, who used to be the FBI director, cleared Hillary Clinton of any criminal wrongdoing in regards to her emails. And there was no other active FBI investigation into the Clintons at that time. But what we see since then is that a whole lot of things that have been percolating in the American right have managed to find their way into now ongoing FBI investigations that were only started after Donald Trump became president. A terrible, terrible example and precedent to set because it involves the persecution of one's defeated political opponent. Imagine the world that we would live in if attorneys general all over the United States, governors of the United States, future presidents took it upon themselves to persecute their defeated political opponents. What type of democracy would even remain in a world like that? So what we see is that Donald Trump and his behavior and his executive branch have managed to drag America to a very dangerous place. And it's a place that will not long survive if the types of activities that Donald Trump has set in these precedents continue.
So to answer the question is the criticism, if criticism wasn't coming from Donald Trump, would it still be warranted? Because the topic is not Donald Trump is not justified in criticizing Hillary Clinton, right? It's like saying the ongoing criticism of Hillary Clinton is unnecessary. That doesn't matter who it's coming from. We're talking about the raw criticism. So what we need to address and talk about is the fact that if Hillary Clinton has done these injustices, if she has done these wrongs, if we can come to that consensus that the Clinton Foundation is doing wrongs with a pay-for-play thing, if we're setting that, then this is not a debate that's entirely about Donald Trump criticizing her. Sure, it's a facet of the issue, but the crux of this issue is, has she committed injustices? And then has she seen the repercussions or the consequences for her actions? If she has not seen these consequences, then the criticism is warranted and necessary and needs to be continued until we see that justice. We have to criticize anyone, no matter who they are, if they have committed an injustice and we aren't seeing that justice come into fruition, right? Now, with again with your point of Donald Trump criticizing her, you talk about criticism, right, and pressure and things like that, but you need a little bit more evidence. The opposition needs more evidence than to say that he has come out and made statements against her. He has like got his attorney general to put pressure. That's not the same as actively influencing an investigation to the scale of which my opponent is saying. So to be intellectually honest here and to be consistent, we have to say that, sure, he might have said some unwise things. Sure, that might not be the healthiest form of criticism, but that does not mean that criticism is unnecessary. That means that he might be just foolishly criticizing her. But the raw criticism, the raw complaints that both Democrats and Republicans and just Americans in general have against Hillary Clinton doesn't mean they're not warranted or not necessary, because the injustice she has committed has not been met with justice or consequence. And so we have to address that as an issue. If we're not addressing that, then this whole thing is moot. Now, if the resolution read differently, if this was all about is Donald Trump's criticism healthy for the investigation, then sure, you've got a lot of points. But this is talking about the criticism of Hillary Clinton. Raw criticism. Is that necessary? No matter what it looks like, do we need to be critiquing her? I think that's the crux of the issue.
So, well, my opponent's been living in a debate world of ifs and ands and buts and maybes. Reality is that in America, there are systems in place to determine whether somebody has actually done wrong. These things are traditionally handled by the Attorney General and the Justice Department and the FBI. Okay, so those things exist. Now, what we have are possible political influences in starting investigations. And now that those investigations are ongoing, we have terrible, terrible precedent of them being slanted. So what we need to do is think about this. Hillary Clinton has been used as a straw man opponent to distract from legitimate problems with the Donald Trump administration. She has said it, there has been a terrible precedent set in persecuting her as a defeated political opponent. And after all of this, any legitimate investigation into the Clintons is going to be damaged by the Donald Trump's coalition and the president's continuous assault against her. And that really is why my side stands.
So my opponent has repeatedly and continuously called Hillary Clinton's criticism a straw man. Defining a straw man is an intentionally misrepresented proposition that is set up because it is easier to defeat than the opponent's real argument. We are not misleading the population talking about things that Hillary Clinton has not done or there is no evidence. To say that it is a straw man would mean that there is no evidence or it is misrepresenting to say that Hillary Clinton has done these things. So that cannot be true and cannot stand. So let's look at the overall crux of this issue. At the end of the day, this is not what ifs, ands, or buts. That is not the case of the argument that I'm making in the slightest. And we have to look realistically at, has Hillary Clinton committed injustices and has she done wrong? If that is true, and my opponent has admitted that she has done things that are wrong and the Clinton Foundation has done things that are sketchy. So that premise is true. Has she received the penalties for what she deserves, or has she received consequences? No, she has not received these consequences because these investigations are ongoing. So until we see a concluded investigation of guilty or not guilty, this criticism is warranted and necessary and can ultimately foster a better discussion about the things that she has done wrong. Also, from the Young Democrat side, they believe that criticism is crucial because they want to see a new face in their party. And if they're not criticizing Hillary Clinton, who is the face of the old Democratic Party, then they're not making much headway, right? So that is necessary in their facet as well. And ultimately, sure, Donald Trump has said some pretty foolish things criticizing Hillary Clinton. I think that can be a little rude, but that doesn't take away from the fact that criticism of the wrongs that Hillary Clinton has committed is necessary and crucial to us seeing these investigations be properly conducted to make sure that we have all of the information, because we're being skeptical and critical of the things that she's done, making sure we have these information to properly investigate her and ultimately see the justice or the repercussions for her actions come into fruition. Until we see that come into fruition, we have to say that this criticism is necessary and important. And for my opponent to only stand on the leg of, well, Donald Trump has said some foolish things about her, is in no way a rebuttal of the fact that the ongoing criticism of her is an important facet to the investigation of her wrongdoings. Thank you.